Hey guys, I hope everyone's having a good Sunday afternoon. I personally, this is my worst time of year. I do not like to spring forward. I'm more of a fallback kind of girl, so I love October. Anywho, I want to address one thing before I even get started. There's a subscriber that's given me thumbs down, and I just want you to know that I still appreciate you because you're not hurting anything that I'm doing. Actually, you're helping me. And I greatly appreciate that because you're making my channel relevant because the algorithm just figures in that there's activity on my page, so it's all the same. So it's all good. I appreciate it. Second of all, I'm going to include the fair use right here. This is going to be a video regarding Kenneka Jenkins, mainly relating to her death and the death investigation or lack thereof. I was going to do this in one big video, but I'm going to do it in little videos because it's just that important to me. I'm a member at study.com, and so I thought I would utilize their videos on this matter because I know a lot of us watch like the First 48 and Forensic Files and shows such as that, and this will really give you the factual process of a crime scene and what should and shouldn't happen. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and play one of their videos. It's called Crime Scene Definition and Components. It's not very long. It's 4 minutes long, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with that.
Most of us have heard something about the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, a 6-year-old Colorado beauty pageant queen. JonBenet was initially reported missing from her home by her parents the day after Christmas in 1996. An initial police search of her residence turned up few clues, with the exception of a ransom letter. However, the father found JonBenet's body later that day in an area of the basement. The basement was immediately secured as a crime scene, along with the rest of the Ramsey home. Despite an extensive investigation, which included processing of the crime scene, JonBenet's murder remains unsolved. In simple terms, a crime scene is the immediate and surrounding area where a crime has been committed. In the opening example, the Ramsey home and basement were crime scenes. A crime scene is likely to provide clues to help solve the crime that was committed. Crime scenes can either be primary or secondary. A primary crime scene is the scene where the actual criminal activity took place. For example, in a murder investigation, the primary crime scene would be the scene where the murder occurred and the person's life was taken. However, there might be additional crime scenes involved as well. For example, the perpetrator might have relocated the body following the murder. Let's say the body was removed and placed in a wooded outdoor area. This would then become the secondary crime scene, as it will also likely yield clues that can assist in solving the crime. In some cases, only the secondary crime scene can be investigated because the primary crime scene remains unknown. In these instances, it is important for investigators to carefully sift through the clues available at the secondary scene because, in addition to trying to solve the crime, they are also attempting to find clues that will help them locate and identify the primary crime scene. In order to collect valid, non-contaminated evidence, it is essential that the crime scene is secured in order to maintain the integrity of the evidence found there. If crime scene evidence is not secured, the likelihood of successfully prosecuting an offender in court decreases. Securing the crime scene begins as soon as the first officer gets to the location. In a best-case scenario, the first arriving officer should carefully approach the location and do an inspection of the visible area. However, if the perpetrator is still at the scene, this officer may have to make an arrest before securing the scene. In both scenarios, it's crucial for the officer to try not to touch or move items in the immediate area. If the area is disturbed by emergency responders, all of this should be documented in detailed notes. Additional notes should be taken on any peculiar smells that are present, the temperature, the suspect and his condition if known, and anything else the officer deems important. After taking these initial notes, the crime scene should be physically secured to only allow those with authority to enter. It is usually a good idea to secure a larger area around the crime scene, since this increases the chances of preserving evidence that may be present outside of the immediate area. Some of the authorized personnel that may be allowed to enter a secured crime scene include medical first responders who are called to the scene, including firefighters and paramedics, law enforcement officers dispatched to the scene, crime scene investigators who are called to collect evidence and photograph the scene, and in the case of a homicide investigation, the coroner. It is important that only essential personnel be permitted to enter the crime scene area, and only those directly involved in the investigation. Family members and friends should not be permitted to enter the area until the investigation is concluded. Let's review. A crime scene is the area and immediate surrounding area where a crime has been committed. There can be more than one crime scene. A primary crime scene is the location where the actual crime took place. Primary crime scenes are not always known to investigators, and at times only the location of a secondary crime scene may be known. A secondary crime scene is a location that holds evidence of the crime, but it is not the location where the crime was originally committed. In order to collect valid and reliable evidence, a crime scene should be secured as quickly as possible. This is usually the responsibility of the first responding officer, who first takes notes and then secures the crime scene area. It is important that only authorized personnel such as medical first responders, law enforcement officers, crime scene investigators, and potentially the coroner be permitted to enter a crime scene in order to maintain the integrity of the area.
So in regards to the Kenneka Jenkins case, after watching this video, you can see that none of that happened. They did not secure a crime scene. They allowed a lot of people to traipse through there, including employees of the hotel. They really, honestly, they should have shut the whole hotel down and used that as their crime scene, because they really hadn't discovered what had happened at that point. And it's not every day that a 19-year-old girl walks into a freezer on her own accord and dies in there. So this was a very peculiar case, and they handled it very badly. They even allowed the mother and sister to come into the crime scene itself, which would have been the kitchen, and they gave her belongings to them. So, I mean, I could go on and on about their errors in that regard. Okay, this is taken from Open Access Peer-Reviewed chapter, Death Scene Investigation from the Viewpoint of Forensic Medicine Expert by Demirci and Dogan, and it was published on September the 12th, 2011. It begins with medical expertise is crucial in death investigation. Begins with the body examination and evidence collection at the scene, and proceeds through history, physical examination, laboratory tests, and diagnosis. The key goal is to provide objective evidence of cause, timing, and manner of death for adjudication by the criminal justice system. In homicide, suspected homicide, and other suspicious or obscure cases, the forensic medicine expert should visit the scene of death before the body is removed. That did not happen in this case. Local practice varies, which of course it does, but any doctor claiming to be a forensic medicine expert should always make himself available to accompany the police to the locus of the death. This duty is often formalized and made part of a contract of service for those forensic medicine experts who are either full-time or substantially involved in assisting the police. I know Cook County is a large county, but it seems like, they don't have enough personnel in the medical examiner's office. They're using this England Wells home office pathologist. These people are permanently on call for such visits, and in many other jurisdictions, such as the medical examiner systems in the USA and the European State and University Institutes of Forensic Medicine, there is usually a prearranged duty roster for attendance at scenes of death. In many cases, the scene investigation is more important than the autopsy. A thorough and complete investigation commonly leads to the proper diagnosis of the cause and manner of death prior to an autopsy. And then it goes into why go to the scene. The purpose of having the forensic medicine expert attend the death scene is several-fold. By viewing the body in the context of its surroundings, the forensic medicine expert is better able to interpret certain findings at the autopsy, such as pattern imprint across the neck, Also able to advise the investigative agency about the nature of the death, whether to confirm a homicide by specific means, evaluate the circumstances, interpret the blood loss, goes on and on there. Um, Back to the death scene. Death scene investigation may include a combination of the following types of incidents and examinations: accidental deaths, which include a multitude of circumstances, including misadventure. That's all we need to hear right there, because that's what it was, um, according to them. Now back to the crime scene. In some incidents, and they use that in quotations, it may be readily apparent that a crime has indeed been committed and it is a crime scene. The primary crime scene is an area, place, or thing where the incident occurred or where the majority or high concentration of physical evidence will be found. For example, where there has been a sudden suspicious death. If this case isn't suspicious, I don't know what they would classify suspicious as. Secondary crime scenes are areas, places, or things where physical evidence relating to the incident may be found. The potential physical evidence will usually be transported away from the primary crime scene. They use examples: the getaway vehicle in crimes of armed robbery, the suspect's environment, the suspect's vehicle, the weapon used in the crime. If a deceased person is at the scene, we call it the death scene. One of the initial and primary tasks is to determine whether a crime has been committed at the death scene. Every death scene is a potential crime scene. Let me reread that. Every death scene is a potential crime scene. It is important to carefully examine the scene for evidence or unusual circumstances that may indicate the death of a person is other than by natural causes. Goes into investigative tools and equipment. They should have waterproof apron and rubber gloves, writing implements, which is pens, pencils, markers, disposable jumpsuits, hair covers, face shields, a thermometer, syringes and needles, sterile swabs, autopsy dissection set, including a handsaw, cutting needles and twine for body closure, swabs and containers for blood and body fluids, formalin jars for historical samples, plastic bags, envelopes, paper, spare pen and pencil, printed body charts for recording external injuries, hand lens, electric torch, mini tape, recorder, foul weather gear. We don't have any of that, but a camera, usually a 35 millimeter camera. It goes into, what to do with those tools, and then it says steps of death scene investigation. The deceased is the most valuable piece of potential evidence at any death scene. Hence, a systematic and thorough examination of the deceased should be undertaken at every death scene. Blood spillage or spatter should be noted and will remain after the removal of the body. Weather conditions, location, and poor lighting may mask some faint injuries and trace evidence on the body. Therefore, the death scene investigator should document in writing, by sketch, and by photography all information about the body that can be gathered at the scene. It should focus on the physical condition of a body at the scene. Without a scene investigation, much initial valuable body information can be lost. The following points will serve as a guide. Pre-planning the death scene investigation. When initially notified, a forensic medicine expert should determine as much information as possible from the caller. Approximate age and gender places a subject in a certain, quote, medical category. An attempt should be made to ascertain if there is any evidence of foul play or if any instruments are available that might have played a role in the subject's death. By gathering these data, a forensic medicine expert is able to anticipate additional information that may be needed upon arrival at the scene. So they're saying before you even get there, there's a body on the scene or a missing person, you have got to prepare for the worst. The first rule in performing a death scene investigation is to make certain that the scene is safe and secure. Usually this requires police involvement, but in some instances it will require other professionals such as fire department personnel or utility workers. The second rule is to not contaminate or disturb the scene, which is exactly what they did. At the very least, death investigators should wear disposable examination gloves, and it is also advisable to wear shoe covers and hairnets. That did not happen in this case. Occasionally, full body covering is desirable. When touching items at a scene, examination gloves should always be worn, and care should be taken not to sit on furniture or lean against or brush against walls or furniture. The death scene investigator must seek answers to the following questions. Is trace evidence of the scene consistent with the death having occurred at this location? Does the body contain any trace evidence that is unusual for this location? For example, mud on the soles of the shoes, grass or seed material embedded in or found on the clothing when the deceased was located inside a building? Do you remember what her shoes look like? Is the death one that can be attributed to natural causes? Are there any external signs of violence? Why, yes, there is. Her lip was busted. She had a contusion to her ankle. Is there anything amiss or out of the ordinary regarding the scene? Yes, there is. In this case, there absolutely is. They talk about cooperation among investigators, the opportunity to meet at the crime scene initiates the collegial working relationship between the forensic medicine expert and the detective slash investigator, and promotes interagency rapport as both professionals strive to solve the medical mystery of why that particular person died at that particular time under those particular circumstances. This is not melodrama, just intellectual satisfaction for exploring an extremely important, educational, and fascinating aspect of death investigation. Documentation of the scene. All death scenes should be secured and recorded photographically and diagrammically. If the information to hand, backed by the postmortem, suggests that the death was due to natural causes, then the scene should not be processed any further. However, if there are signs at the scene and other information suggests that the deceased died in suspicious circumstances, and this is reinforced by signs of a struggle or anything unusual, further processing for latent impressions and trace evidence should be taken. The four major tasks of documentation are note-taking, videography, photography, and sketching. All four of those are necessary and none is an adequate substitute for the other. And it says, for example, notes are not substitutes for photography. Taking notes at the death scene. Effective notes as part of an investigation provides a written record of all of the crime scene activities. The notes are taken as the activities are completed to prevent possible memory loss if notes are made at a later time. Accurate crime scene note taking is crucial at CIDR, the who, what, when, why, and how, and specifically include the notification information, the arrival information, the scene description, victim description, crime scene team. It says they should observe a great deal but do very little. That's for the forensic medicine expert. He or she should note the position of the body in relation to nearby objects and establish the plan of the premises if indoors. A sketch or his own photograph is sometimes useful, and some forensic medicine experts use a Polaroid, digital, or video camera for instant recording of the death scene. Any obvious cause of death should be observed, and any blood pools or splashes noted in relation to the position of the corpse. Goes on here talking about gunshot, videotaping the death scene. Videotaping a death scene has become a routine documentation procedure. Its acceptance is widespread due to the three-dimensional portrayal of the scene and increased availability of affordable equipment with user-friendly features like zoom lens and compact size. Jury acceptability and expectation have also added to the recognized use of videography in death scene investigations. Photographing the death scene. The purpose of still photography, documentation of the death scene, is to provide a true and accurate pictorial record of the death scene and physical evidence present. Still photography records the initial condition of the scene. It provides investigators and others with a record that can be analyzed and examined subsequent to the scene investigation and serves as a permanent record for legal concerns. It should be done immediately following the videography of the scene or after the preliminary scene survey. It allows orientation of the entire death scene, orientation of the evidence within the scene, and provides examination quality photographs of specific items of evidence that may be used for analysis away from the scene. That would have been anything found in the freezer, the lip gloss, just anything found at that scene. Hair tie. The scene and body are photographed before anything is moved or removed. Treat the body with respect. Never remove the clothing in full view of onlookers. If it is not feasible to move the body to a secure area of the scene, police officers may hold up sheets around the body. Sketching the death scene. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a sketch of this death scene. That's just me personally. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I have not seen one. Identification of the deceased. We knew that there was a missing person in that hotel, and then hence we find a body in the freezer after an employee walks directly to it with a set of keys, opens the door, finds a dead body, and unbothered walks back to find a police officer with the keys in his hand. A little strange. Examination of the body. It says a systematic, thorough inspection and evaluation of the decedent should be performed by a forensic medicine expert. If he or she always begins at the top of the subject's body and moves toward the feet, the possibility of missing important injuries or evidence is lessened. The body should be prone, which is face up, during the examination, if possible. Photos of the original position of the body must be taken before the body is moved. One begins with a general assessment and progresses from head to toe, pushing clothing aside but not removing it. Some find it easier to access rigor, liver, and algor mortis initially. The purpose of the assessment of the body at the scene is to provide some insight into the nature of the case and a working cause of death. One of the most important questions that needs answering, and it also needs answering in this case as well, is, did death occur at this location? The position in which the deceased was discovered is of particular importance, as it will provide an indication as to whether the deceased was moved or not before being discovered. The presence or absence of rigor mortis or stiffness of the body, whether absent, minimal, moderate, advanced, or complete, will help the death scene investigator determine if the person died at that locus and the position is found. Some death scene investigators with relevant training and experience, with relevant training and experience, may feel that they are in position to evaluate rigor mortis and hypostasis. A pink-purple discoloration is usually present at the lowest point of the body. This is due to the settling of the blood by gravitation, and the location and state of fixation should be noted and photographed. For example, unfixed liver blanches white when moderate pressure is applied, as opposed to fixed liver mortis, which remains the same color when pressure is applied. If liver mortis is noted on the deceased in areas not consistent with forming in the lowest parts of the body, then the death scene investigator should consider the possibility that the deceased was moved after death. And it says, victims may be found in contorted or apparently uncomfortable positions on the floor, commonly the bedroom or the bathroom. Generally, the more contorted the body, the more sudden the death. This person appears to have, quote, fallen in his tracks, end quote. However, this does not mean the decedent lying apparently comfortable in bed did not die suddenly. Bodies found in awkward positions that compromise breathing can die of positional asphyxia. The chest wall must be able to rise and fall for respiration to occur. If one is wedged too tightly in a position, the chest wall cannot rise and fall. Many inexperienced investigators focus on a major injury and neglect to evaluate the rest of the individual. This can lead to important oversights such as fingernail marks, bruises, And you can see in that picture where chest asphyxiation would have happened because that gentleman was stuck in such a tight space. Marks, bruises, and abrasions. Documentation of this inspection should be made, noting the presence and absence of unusual markings or abnormalities. Let's see. Is there anything else in here about crime scene? After surveying the overall death scene, it should be easy to recognize the sequence in which evidence is to be collected and areas to be searched, and in what order. The collection and search should be systematic, ensuring absolutely nothing is overlooked. Priority in collection should be given to any items that are in danger of being removed or destroyed by wind, rain, vehicles, animals, tides, and the movement of individuals at the scene. The collection of any evidence which will enable access to the deceased or any critical area of the death scene, such as along entry and exit paths. Those critical areas of the crime scene which may render the most evidence, or once processed, enable the removal of a body or the remainder of the examination to be carried out. Areas which may give a quick indication as to the identity of any suspects. Areas which, when processed, will permit the release of scene guards and other resources. And the general examination of the remainder of the death scene for potential evidence. Clues about the cause and manner of a death and who committed a crime may be found at the scene. The following list includes different types of evidence and how they are usually collected and preserved: blood, semen, fingerprints. So soft objects that leave an impression may be collected in their entirety. Prints on hard objects like glass or furniture should be lifted at the scene. As far as I know, they didn't do any fingerprinting of the freezer area. Firearms and other weapons, bullets and cartridges, hairs and fibers. These should be placed in separate containers and should not be crushed with hard objects such as metal tweezers. Suspicious foods and pills. As far as I know, her cup was still upstairs somewhere. That was never collected. Footprints and tire marks. At the scene, casts should be made and close-up photographs taken. Blood spatters, tool marks, and other. It says glass, soil, documents, cigarette butts, tobacco, and all items thought to be involved in arson should be collected and submitted to a lab. So, as we can see from just the things mentioned in this video regarding crime scene, they really did nothing by the book. If you've never heard the word chain of custody, or the term chain of custody, it's very important, especially in a death investigation. So I'm going to play this video.
Imagine you are a crime scene specialist investigating a homicide. During the investigation, you find a drop of blood on the floor near the doorway, leading away from the victim's body. This could definitely be important evidence, so it needs to be collected. How do you go about doing this? If the blood ends up being critical to the case, you will have to testify in court that you collected it. You'll have to explain where you found it and how it was collected, and you will have to swear under oath that the swab presented to the court is the same one you collected. The trial may not take place for months or even years. How will you be sure this evidence is tracked, logged, and protected from tampering? The processes for documenting, collecting, and protecting evidence are called establishing a chain of custody. Creating and maintaining a chain of custody means that a detailed log is kept of where the evidence was found and logging anything that happens to the evidence prior to trial. For this lesson, let's follow the documentation, collection, and packaging process for the blood on our homicide investigation. You'll see all the different steps required for creating and maintaining a chain of custody when it comes to crime scene evidence. Chain of custody always begins with crime scene specialist, or the professionals conducting the crime scene investigation. When evidence is first found on a crime scene, steps have to be taken to document where that evidence was found. This is usually done with crime scene photographs and notes taken during the initial investigation. Most police agencies and crime labs will label items of evidence with a number once it has been located. In the picture, the investigator has labeled the crowbar as item number 1 and is photographing it in place. This is usually the starting place for documenting the location of the evidence. Once the item has been photographed, crime scene investigators will take measurements of the evidence to further document its location. There are several methods for measuring evidence on a crime scene, but one of the most common methods is the rectangular coordinates method. To use this method, the investigator picks a fixed point in the scene or a reference point, such as the northwest corner of the master bedroom, then measures the distance to the evidence from that point. Let's use our blood as an example. This simple sketch on the screen shows us that the blood was found on the floor 8 feet and 9 inches east of the fixed point and 9 feet and 2 inches south of the fixed point. After the blood stain is documented in place with photographs, notes, and sketches, we are now ready to collect it. In the example, you will need to collect the blood using a sterile swab. Because you are touching the swab to the evidence, the blood, it needs to be sterile, so that you can be sure you aren't contaminating the evidence with anything that might have been on the swab. You will also need to wear gloves while doing this, so that you don't contaminate the swab with any of your own DNA. Wearing gloves is a cardinal rule for almost all crime scene investigations. If the investigation requires it, additional PPE or personal protective equipment like shoe covers, hairnets, masks, goggles, and bodysuits may be required. Now that we have documented and collected the evidence, what's the next step in the chain of custody? You will need to be sure that the evidence collected makes it from the crime scene to an evidence storage facility without being tampered with or lost. Many crime scene units transport their evidence to a crime lab for further analysis once it is collected from the scene. To ensure the evidence is not tampered with, a crime scene specialist will create an evidentiary seal or evidence seal on the packaging he used for collection. The blood swab from our homicide investigation will be placed in a sterile envelope and sealed with an evidence seal. Evidence tape has jagged little edges on it, which makes it almost impossible to peel off without breaking. But this type of tape isn't necessary for creating an evidence seal. An evidence seal can be created with regular packaging tape if the collector's initials and badge or employee identification number are added to the tape. This seal allows the collector to recognize his own handwriting on an unbroken seal. So if the package with the swab you collected is handed to you during trial, several years from now, you will be able to say that the evidence seal you created is intact. You can then testify with confidence that the evidence has not been tampered with or altered, and when the evidence was sealed in the envelope, if the date was added. Evidence needs to follow a chain of custody, or the processes for documenting, collecting, and protecting evidence. It has to be documented when it is found on scene. Documentation steps include photography, note-taking, and sketching. It also has to be collected in a manner that protects it from contamination. It must be marked and packaged with an evidence seal to ensure it is not tampered with or compromised once it has been entered as evidence in a storage facility or crime lab. Following all of these steps ensures that the chain of custody is not broken and allows for an investigator to testify with confidence when asked about the integrity of evidence during a trial.
And then lastly, they have told so many lies, blatant lies, over the course of this investigation, especially in the beginning, that it also makes the whole thing suspicious. I'm going to play a clip from a video from another YouTuber, Who Conspiracies, and this is the gentleman outside at the protest, and he's talking to Lenora, who is Kenneka's sister. And I just want you to check out what he says. She's asking him if the police should have given back Kenneka's stuff to her and her mom. We all saw that in the video, the surveillance video at the hotel. So let's hear his response.
No need to give Listen.
What's they supposed to take off Kenneka bones?
Absolutely not.
Now watch this. He just said absolutely not. They was not supposed to take off this young lady belonging. Anybody know anything about an investigation, you know, they gonna keep everything that's on that person that expired for the simple reason, especially if they don't know the way that this person died, or whether it was murdered or whether it was an accident. They gonna keep every single object on them in case it could be blood, semen, it could be any type of evidence, hair, anything on that person objects. They gave the family the watches and piercings and something that was in this young lady's hair back. Okay. The detective that was supposed to be there that night when they first found the young lady's body. That's very, very odd to me. I don't know if y'all caught on to that. You watch First 48, Forensic Files, Crime 360, any show involving murderers, you will never hear nothing like this happen, or people dying. You'll never hear nothing like this happening at the beginning of an investigation. They gonna keep every little bit of evidence they can. Now, he just said absolutely not. We would not ever give you anything that she had on. Now, when the family finna tell them that they actually...
So, he's just breaking down the question and then his narrative or his commentary. I also want to insert fair use in right here as well, that I'm using his video just as sort of a evidence, if you will, to show where they have lied, and I have to interrupt the video to show you that. So
got things that the young lady had on that night, he finna instantly contradict himself and just listen to him. That's the chief of police again, you guys.
Cook County medical examiner, they'll hold anything that's with her now stays with the medical examiner, and then they'll release it.
No, they gave her belly ring,
Listen to it.
a watch, and her head, the thing that was in her head, they gave us that too.
And so you have those.
Yes, we have.
But y'all catch that. So you have those.
Keep them, then somebody.
Why, if it's evidence?
Because if it's not directly related, if it doesn't have a cause,
So why did they
we often give valuables back to the family because it's more. I'd rather have you preserving valuables than having valuables go missing.
So wait, Jazz, if it's a...
So, he contradicted himself completely on that. First, he said, yes, everything must stay with the body. It's very important. It's crucial, blah, blah, blah. When he finds out that they actually gave them this stuff, then he's like, oh, well, you know, I'd rather be safe with you guys than floating around the medical examiner's office. So which is it? Is it important evidence, or is it just because you're afraid it's valuables and you're afraid somebody's going to be held accountable if they don't have it? So it's little stuff like that that you catch that really makes you wonder. So that's pretty much all I have on the investigation at this point and how it was botched from the jump. And I'm going to be doing another video shortly, so hope you guys have a good rest of your day.